We know that you're with us at all times. We thank you for that. Thank you for guiding us and giving us structure, teaching us. Please help us to glean some more from your word this evening as we study 1 Samuel, and be with me that I can recall the things that I studied and present them in a way that edifies everybody and helps us all to grow so that we can apply your word to our lives and shine our light to this dark world. We're especially grateful for Jesus and the sacrifice he made for us. In that we have the hope of heaven. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. So 1 Samuel 13 through 15 was your assignment, and I hope you read it. I want to start by thanking you all for allowing me to study deeper into 1 Samuel, especially these three chapters, 13, 14, and 15. I want to thank the elders for all that they do in leading the flock, feeding the flock. I want to thank Oliver for volunteering me to pick some portions in 1 and 2 Samuel to teach on Wednesday evenings over the next few months. Me and him have an understanding that I'm like the son who said no to his father when he was asked to go work in the field, but then later regretted it, relented, and decided to obey his father and went into the field and did the work. I want to thank everybody for all the work that they do, for stepping up. I'm often amazed by all the service that I see around me and this church family. There's a lot of people doing things behind the scenes and up front, and we need it all, and it's wonderful. It's uplifting to me and encouraging. And a special shout out to Oliver and Chad and Eric, who have carried us through the first 12 chapters of 1 Samuel. I've really enjoyed these lessons, and I'm going to take Eric's lead on the way he presented last week, and follow his pattern, which is basically the majority of the thing is we're going to read it. We're going to read these three chapters, and then maybe some open-ended questions like he asked to stimulate all of our understanding and insight. One final shout out to Matt for teaching this sermon last Sunday. His lesson on the narrow path really struck me, and it increased my knowledge of the way, the path, and me and Oliver were talking about that a couple weeks ago in Proverbs class. The term "the way" is used 6 times in Acts to describe the early church. Acts 9:2, 19:9, and 23. Acts 22:4, 24:14, and verse 22 in chapter 24. In Acts 18:26, there's talk about the way of God from for Apollos to learn it better from who are they? Priscilla and Aquila. And in 2 Peter 2:2, we hear about the way of truth. And in Hebrews 10, 19 and 20, there's talk about a new and living way. And we know from John 14 that Jesus says he is the way. Jesus is the way. The reason I mention this is because in Proverbs 4:18 and 19, it says, "But the path of righteousness is like the light of dawn that shines brighter and brighter until the full day. The way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know over what they stumble." And this just came to mind to me from Matt's lesson and me studying 1 Samuel 13 through 15, because I think it comes in to what we're going to talk about tonight. In Proverbs 14:12, it says, "There is a way which seems right to a person, but in the end, it's the way of death or the way of destruction." And that's definitely going to come in tonight to what we're talking about. Because at the end of Judges, the last verse in Judges 21:25, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel, and everybody did what was right in their own eyes. That's how we ended Judges. Then we started 1 Samuel, and we're talking about this early time in Israel's history when they finally say, give us a king. They demand a king in 1 Samuel 8. That's pretty much what that whole chapter is about. Them saying, oh, we want a king, like them, like the neighbors, like the Canaanites, right? And it reminded me when we were reading 1 Samuel 18, Chad, I think, was doing that one. It reminded me of Deuteronomy 17, verses 14 through 20, where God gives us a lot of information about kings and what kings, he gives commandments to the king, what they should be doing, right? It's an interesting passage, Deuteronomy 17, because it's God's prophecy of what's happening in these chapters. What we're talking about right now in 1 Samuel. God predicted it back in Deuteronomy, told Moses, he said, in Deuteronomy 17, starting in verse 14, it says, when you enter the land which the Lord your God is giving you, and you take possession of it, and live in it, and you say, I will appoint a king over me like all the nations who are around me. That's what Israel's going to do. That's God's saying, this is what you're going to do. In verse 15, he says, you shall in fact appoint a king over you, whom the Lord your God chooses. So now he's prophesying that he's going to pick the king that's going to be anointed and appointed to the people. Right? Continue on. One from among you, your countrymen, you shall appoint as king over yourselves. You shall not put a foreigner over yourself, anyone who is not your countryman. And he goes on in verse 16. In any case, he is not to acquire many horses for himself, nor shall he make the people return to Egypt in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never again return that way. And he shall not acquire many wives for himself, so that his heart does not turn away, nor shall he greatly increase silver and gold for himself. I want you to hear in that I don't think there's any king of Israel or Judah any time in their history that doesn't break one of those. Or all of them, right. Many of them break a lot of them, including Samuel. With the collection of wives, he turned away from God. We know that, This is the part that I wanted to highlight for tonight, starting in verse 18. And it says, now it shall come about when the king sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law on a scroll in the presence of a Levitical priest, or the Levitical priests, plural, and it shall be with him, that means that scroll that he wrote of the law shall be with him, and he shall read it all the days of his life, so that he will learn to fear the Lord his God by carefully following all the words of this law and these statutes, so that his heart will not be haughty, proud towards his countrymen, and that he will not turn away from the commandments to the right or to the left, so that he and his sons may live long in his kingdom in the midst of Israel. So I wanted to bring that up because Matt's sermon on Sunday was about a path. And this says, this is the way you don't turn to the right or the left of that path, right? The king needs to be doing these things, right? So God prophesied that the people would no longer accept their true God, him, God. That's their true king. And they would ask for a human king with all these warnings and commandments in Deuteronomy 17. Again, we get those same kind of prophecies and warnings in 1 Samuel chapter 8 that Chad talked. And then again in chapter 12, Eric last week talked about those kind of warnings are brought up again. Be careful. The king's going to take your daughters and your sons, and he's going to do things, right? The main thing to know is God chose King Saul. He was appointed and anointed by Samuel in the previous chapters, which brings us to chapter 13. So let's get into it. 1 Samuel 13, the first 15 verses, I titled this, What Have You Done? So we're going to read it. I might stop, I will stop at 15 and then maybe ask for some thoughts and what you guys think. 2 Samuel 13, starting in verse 1. Now it was after this that, nope, I'm in 2 Samuel. That doesn't sound right. 1 Samuel 13, verse 1. So I want you to know I'm reading a NASB version. I struggled with this week because I usually do New King James Version when I'm teaching, but this first verse in chapter 13 has a lot of controversy in different versions, so I'd rather do this one than the New King James. So 13:1, Saul was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 42 years over Israel. Now in Acts, we do get confirmation that he ruled for 40 years, but this is why there's controversy. Some versions say that in his first year of reign, in his second year of reign, there's kind of some they don't really know in Hebrew what's really, how it translates. I don't think it matters. I think what really matters is that we know that Saul's reigning for some amount of time, and this is in his reign that the next stuff is going to happen, right? I figure this is pretty soon after, based on the issue that comes up a little bit later about 7 days waiting for Samuel to arrive. So verse 2, now Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel, of which 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in the hill country of Bethel, while 1,000 were with Jonathan at Gibeah of Benjamin. But he sent away the rest of the people, each to his own tent. Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. Then Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land, saying, let the Hebrews hear. All Israel heard the news that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and also that Israel had become odious to the Philistines. The people were then summoned to Saul at Gilgal. Now the Philistines assembled to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people like the sand which is on the seashore in abundance. And they came up and camped in Michmash, east of Beth-aven. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were hard pressed, then the people hid themselves in caves, in thickets, in cliffs, in cellars, and in pits. Also some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. But as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Now he waited 7 days according to the appointed time set by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul said, bring to me the burnt offering and the peace offerings, and he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and to greet him. Verse 11, but Saul said, what have you done? And Saul said, because I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the appointed days, and that the Philistines were assembled at Michmash, therefore I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not asked the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. Samuel said to Saul, you have acted foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which he commanded you. For now the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not endure. The Lord has sought out for himself a man after his own heart, and the Lord has appointed him as ruler over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. Then Samuel arose and went up from Gilgal to Gibeah of Benjamin, and Saul numbered the people who were present with him, about 600 men. All right. So I know you probably heard it in verse 14, a man after his own heart. There it is. We're already getting a prophecy about the next king, aren't we? That's David, right? And I just want you to take note of that verse before that, the verse 13 and 14, where it's very clear that the consequences for your actions are that your kingdom will not last forever. Your kingdom's not going to go on, right? And also notice that there's no recorded reaction from Saul. from hearing that from Samuel. But go back a little bit further. Where's his mistake? Where does King Saul making a mistake here? Where's the error? We know it. Samuel tells us.
He did what was right in his own mind.
Exactly. He didn't obey the commands of God. The commands of God says who's supposed to do the sacrifices.
Only the Levites.
That's right. Samuel was, right? Samuel's a prophet and a Levite, a priest, right? He was trained by Eli. So he could do the sacrifices, right? So why does Saul think that he can do it? What's going on here? He panicked. Fear, pride. Right. Yeah, I could do what I want, right? And this is right after, remember, he got the gift of prophecy for a minute to kind of that miracle to show that he was appointed by God, that he's supposed to be king. So maybe the thought that, if I can prophesy, maybe I can offer sacrifice too, right?
Or since he is king, he feels he needs to do something because Samuel didn't show up, but even though maybe he showed up 20 minutes after he did the sacrifice.
That's right. A little bit of panic, right? A little bit of fear.
Well, in 11, he says, when I saw the people were scattering from me. So he was afraid that the people were not going to follow him and to be followed.
That's right. It's kind of a military decision, isn't it? He needs guidance. He knows he's supposed to do this with Samuel. He's supposed to do this thing to get God on his side, or to get lined up with God's will. This is how they thought about this, pre-battle sacrifice. And furthermore, he says they might come down on me in Gilgal. Gilgal is lower in elevation, right? It's down the hill. So he's in a low position, not a very good position. Eric probably knows. It's harder to defend down there than up there, right? So he doesn't want them to come down. I want to get this done so we can get up on higher ground and have a better battle position, right? And before all the people leave, because everybody's leaving, right?
Like a lot of leaders, they forget that God's in charge.
Yeah.
And they lose control of themselves, and they become fearful and cowardly.
He thinks he has to do stuff. He thinks he has to do something with the army. I'm the commander in chief. I gotta direct. I gotta get everything. I gotta get moving, right? And forgetting that it's really about God, God's will, and you're working for God. It's His people that's who you're leading. His people. So if God's people, He's gonna take care of it, right? I totally agree. And the funny thing is if you remember at the very first of this, who defeated the Philistines? You guys remember back in the first verses? Verse 3, who smote the garrison? Jonathan, right? But then it spreads the word in verse 4, the news goes that Saul had smitten the garrison, right? So again, I think there's some pride going on here, right? He thinks he's doing it. Or, my son, That's right. And the irony is, most of the time when God defeats an army, He's always doing it with less numbers. So it doesn't matter how many people are there with you, Saul. What matters is you're trusting God and relying on Him, right? So, like Chad, I like maps too. So I got a map for us, show a little bit. This whole part of everything that happens in these chapters is pretty much in that section that says Benjamin. You can see Gilgal's just outside of that in the Manasseh section on this map, but it's all of that section. And I want you to understand that straight up the line here from Judah, Benjamin, Ephraim, Manasseh, that's the high point. That's the ridge. And it's downhill down to the Jordan and the Dead Sea, and it's downhill to the Mediterranean. Right? So that's the high point. That's the rib, the ridge that we're talking about. And the Philistines are up there. They're up high. The garrison is up high. Okay? So, any other comments about that? That what I call his first, Saul's first boo-boo, at least recorded, as king. Okay, so let's continue. Verse 16, rest of the chapter. Now Saul and his son Jonathan and the people who were present with him were staying in Gibeah of Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Michmash. And the raiders came from the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One company turned toward Ophrah, to the land of Shaul. Another company turned towards Beth Horon, and another company turned towards the border which overlooks the valley of Zeboim, towards the wilderness. Now, no blacksmith could be found in all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, otherwise the Hebrews will make swords or spears. So all Israel went down to the Philistines, each to sharpen his plowshare, his mattock, his axe, and his hoe. The charge was 2/3 of a shekel for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, and the axes, and to fix the hoes. So it came about on the day of battle that neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but they were found with Saul and his son Jonathan. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. Okay. So, interesting situation. It sounds like they're kind of under the rule of the Philistines in the sense that they're kind of writing the policies of the land, aren't they? You can't have a blacksmith down here. You can't have any smiths down here or up here. You have to go down to our land and pay our guys to sharpen your farm equipment, right? The goads of for your.
The reason he did it is so they couldn't have any swords.
Right. Kind of controlling the weapons. There's no weapons in Israel at this time, right? The only 2 that are mentioned are what Jonathan has and what Saul has. Those are the only 2 swords in all the people. Of course, you could use a lot of other things to fight. We know that, but weaponry is a big factor in warfare, isn't it? I mean, if you have superior weapons, you're more likely to win the day. And we already heard that they had a lot of chariots, a lot of horsemen, which is also superior technology when you think about it at this time, right? It's more than the weapons. It helps with their military tactics. They're more mobile. They're quicker, right, on the horses and the chariots. They're higher up from the ground over a foot soldier. There's a lot of things going on here with that kind of stuff. Now, this is a map I got up here that shows the cities that are kind of talked about here on this side, and Philistia over here, kind of controlling what's going on in Israel. And then this is talking about the kind of maneuvers that were happening in these verses, and the ones that are coming up in chapter 14. We get some more of these movements and stuff going on here. So remember, he was in Gilgal. Saul was in Gilgal waiting for Samuel. And it says that he waited the 7 days and Samuel hadn't arrived. And then he did the sacrifices and then Samuel arrived, which makes me wonder. Sounds like Samuel did show up within 7 days, just later in the day than Saul was comfortable with or something, right? And then he comes up around here and gets up to Geba, right? And then we're going to hear more about what happens with Jonathan coming up here. So, any thoughts on this section about the having to kind of be under the thumb of the Philistines as far as controlling their weapons, the number of weapons that are available to the Israelites?
None of this is happening accidentally. It's all in God's plan.
Yep. Exactly. God, we know God uses everything for the good of his people, good of people who love him. So he's doing it then. He's doing it here, right?
So this isn't so much on the story necessarily, but
He's older.
He seems to be much older than David, and this never occurred to me.
And I thought about that when you come into to chapter 14 and he talks about Jonathan and his armor bearer. And we know that later on that David becomes Saul's armor bearer after he's soothing him with, his music and calming his spirit. And I get the impression that as well, that David at this time must be a child, if he's even alive yet at this time. I feel like this is early enough in Saul's reign that makes sense in the dating of it all. Also means that David can't be Jonathan's armor bearer in the next chapter. It's another young man, unidentified young man, right? Because that was my first thought. Well, maybe David's his armor bearer. Armor bearer to Jonathan before he becomes Saul's armor bearer later on. No, I don't think so. I think he's too young. Any other thoughts about this section, the last part of 13? Any questions? All right, let's go on. Chapter 14. We'll do 1 through 15 on this reading. Now the day came that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come and let us cross over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree which is in Migron, and the people who were with him were about 600 men. And Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of the Lord at Shiloh, was wearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Between the passes by which Jonathan sought to cross over to the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp crag on the one side and a sharp crag on the other side. And the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other was Sinah. The one crag rose on the north opposite Michmash, and the other on the south opposite Geba. Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come, let us cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will work for us, for the Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few." His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Turn yourself, and here I am with you according to your desire." Then Jonathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and reveal ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hands. And this shall be the sign for us, be the sign to us." Then both of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. The Philistines said, "Behold, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." So the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, "Come up to us, and we will tell you something." And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into our hands, given them into the hands of Israel." Then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet with his armor bearer behind him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer put some to death after him. That first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within about half a furrow and an acre of land. And there was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. Even the garrison and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked so that it became a great trembling of God. Quite a tale. Jonathan and his armor bearer getting it done, right? I like this picture because it shows him actually climbing on his hands and his feet, which it says that's what they had to do, going up this crag or whatever it was. And the Philistines say, "Come on up." And that's the sign. We're gonna go up there and we're gonna defeat them because the Lord is with us, right?
Philistines had no idea what they were inviting upon themselves.
Not at all, right? And it refers back to the previous chapter where we talked about them all hiding in the crags, in the pits, all these little places, caves. They're hiding everywhere. without weapons, right? They're hiding in all these spots without weapons because they didn't have swords or spears, right? And these two guys, the son of the king and his armor bearer, 10 each, right? Took out 10 mighty men of valor each, at a high point, right? Again, doesn't make sense as a strategy, because they're attacking from below, right? But they won because they had God, right? I like this one too. It kind of shows the crag again climbing up. You can see him up there kind of good. Okay, any thoughts on this? Was that? Who can be against you? Exactly. That's right. That's right. Jonathan knew his relationship with God was good. He was looking. He was, he. What did he say about God? God can use a few, or he can use many. There's no restraint. He can do whatever he wants. Basically, that's what he says to his armor bearer. And his armor bearer says, "Yeah, that sounds right."
Well, his armor bearer must have been a man of faith too.
Or he wouldn't have followed him up there, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he never asks us to do something that we can't do.
It's too bad they didn't have an Old Testament that could see all these examples of how obedience produced results.
They did. They had the Torah at this time. Yeah. Yeah. I think by this time there was plenty of times that they would have known about where God used very few people to win the day, especially to pay back any oppressors, what they got coming to them, kind of thing. I know.
They knew that they were in trouble when they took Israel.
And that's clear when it talks at the end when there's trembling, like, oh, here it is. when they come with their God, we tremble, right? And I think that's the that's the idea here. And I quoted the last verse in 14 here, but I think that's the idea, that the Lord delivered them. The Lord did this.
That's when they were at the bottom of the hill, just starting to climb up.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, with the two crags. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Maybe it was a blessing not to have swords carry up the hill.
Well, Jonathan had one or something. He and Saul were the only two that did have a weapon. But yeah, maybe his armor bearer didn't have anything that we think of as a weapon. Maybe he had you could fight with hoes and yeah. Yeah, he was carrying the armor, right? But he had God with him. That's the idea, right? These two guys had God with them, and that's the difference. They don't need a bunch of swords and a bunch of weapons. They don't need a bunch of men. Oh, it was I had forward too. Yeah, already forgot what I had set up on the PowerPoint. So 16 through 23, the rest of this chapter. Now Paul's watchmen in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they were here and there. Saul said to the people who were with him, "Number now and see who has gone from us, And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. Then Paul said to Ahiah, that's the priest, bring the ark of God here, for the ark of God was at that time with the sons of Israel. When Saul talked to the priest, the commotion in the camp of the Philistines continued and increased. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was very great confusion. Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them all around in the camp, even those also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines had fled, even they also pursued them closely in the battle. So the Lord delivered Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond Beth-aven. So, victory, right? It continued beyond just Jonathan and his armor bearer. What do you think about that part where he's talking to the priest about the ark, bringing up the ark, and then he tells him to basically stay his hand, right? What's going on there? Withdraw your hand, he says. Any thoughts on that? Maybe he was trying to do another one of these sacrifices with the priest this time to find out, if they're in line with God, or. It says that the priest earlier has the ephod. If you remember, the ephod had a compartment that held the Urim and the Thummim, right? Which is kind of like lots casting, right? Like you could do something with these things, and they would tell you, God's will, like casting lots. We know that's a thing that was happening throughout Israel's time, including up to picking the apostle who was going to replace Judas, right? They cast lots, and that's how they knew who it was going to be. So maybe that was going on. Like he's trying to get, some insight about that, right? The ark of God is still with the Israelites at this point. That's a good thing, right? Isn't it funny, though, sometimes the Israelites kind of venerate the ark and the priest more than God sometimes? Like, like we can rely on, let's hear what the ark has to say, like.
It seems to me they were literally convinced that God
Lived there. Yeah. Yeah. Sit on the mercy seat, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So another map of the sort of maneuvers. Maybe that's the sort of valley that you're talking about that you saw, that was that rocky. And it is. I mean, every picture you see of this area, it's just that tan-colored rocks, and it's the hard, Sharpie ones, not the, it just doesn't look fun to deal with at all. And then you see that they all rallied, they hit that outpost, and then they kept going towards Michmash, and then Saul kind of brought the people around the other way, flanked them, and they scattered them. They went everywhere, right? It said they went, they fled, right? Okay. The last part of 14. Starting in verse 24. Now the men of Israel were hard pressed on that day, for Saul had put the people under oath, saying, "Cursed be the man who eats food before evening, and until I have avenged myself on my enemies." So none of the people tasted food. All right, let's talk about that for a minute. What's going on with Saul here? What is he doing? He's not, is he?
You don't starve your army.
Why would you starve your army? But it's kind of personal, isn't it? He wants revenge, right? I have been avenged, he says, until I have been avenged myself on the enemies, right? So it's a personal thing instead of This isn't about you. This is about God and God's people. It's not about Saul, but he's making it about himself, right? And you guys can't eat until I get my revenge, you know? Wow.
He's the king.
Yeah. But again, like Samuel told him at the end of 13, it sounds pretty foolish to me. It doesn't seem like very wise to starve my army. They need their fighting strength, especially these days, right? They're fighting the Philistines without weapons, you know? Okay, verse 25. All the people of the land entered the forest, and there was honey on the ground. Then the people entered the forest. Behold, there was a flow of honey, but no man put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared the oath. But Jonathan had not heard when his father put the people under the oath. Therefore, he put out the end of his staff that was in his hand and dipped it in the honeycomb and put his hand to his mouth, and his eyes brightened. So he must have had some kind of spear or staff, and he gets some honey on it, on the end of it, doesn't he? And I like how it says his countenance rised, or his eyes brightened. Right? Food, right? Energy, right? Sugar, right? Quick energy. We know it is. Then one of the people said, your father strictly put the people under oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food today. And the people were weary. Of course they were. They're not eating. Then Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. See now how my eyes have brightened because I tasted a little of this honey. The son apparently is wiser than the father at this moment, right? Dad's doing foolishly. He's troubling the land. He's troubling us. Verse 30, how much more if only the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies which they found? For now the slaughter among the Philistines has not been great. Wow. We could have done so much more. We could have got way more spoils from this battle if Dad hadn't done this. If everybody had gotten to eat something. 31. They struck among the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people were very weary. The people rushed greedily upon the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slew them on the ground, and the people ate them with the blood. Uh-oh. Ravenous, so they're not making good decisions themselves, are they? Then they told Saul, saying, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. And he said, you have acted treacherously. Roll a great stone to me today. I don't know. Maybe he's talking about a stone to use as an altar. But they all know that eating the blood is forbidden. I mean, that's clear. 34, Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, each one of you bring me his ox or his sheep and slaughter it here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So all the people that night brought each one of his ox with him and slaughtered it there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he built to the Lord. Then Saul said, let us go down after the Philistines by night and take spoil among them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them. And they said, do whatever seems good to you. So the priest said, let us draw near to God here. Saul inquired of God, shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him on that day. Wonder why.
It doesn't seem to me that Saul ever makes the connection between their sin and his responsibility for it.
Right.
You guys are the bad guys, not me. I didn't do it.
And he blames them. He blamed them before, right? They were scattering. The people. It's always somebody else's fault. There's a lot of blame with Saul, isn't there? Maybe that's one of the. When I was doing this lesson, the thought that kept coming up is, we get the choice to be a good example or a bad example, and we can read good examples and bad examples here, and Saul is clearly at this point, he's a bad example. He might have been a good example in, previous chapters when he was first anointed. There's some humility with him. He was doing okay. He was staying humble, right? But at this point, he's to the right or to the left of the path, right? He's always deciding to go to the right or to the left. He's not obeying God, right? And there's arrogance in it, and there's blame, complaining, all the things that we know. No, that's off the path. Typically human. Yeah. He hasn't done anything to get to reconnect to God. He hasn't confessed, repented. He hasn't done anything to come back to God from the stuff he did in Gilgal. Not that I can see.
Well, it's certainly not his job to make sacrifices.
Definitely not his job to make sacrifices. And I mean, he doesn't want the people eating blood. At least he knows that much. He's trying to do something right, but he's still off track. Oh man, not going to get through this. All right. Anyway, what's that?
Read the last verse of both chapters. Just come back next week.
No. You guys can read it. Anyway, I figure this is kind of his second big mess up, and then there's a lot of more about fighting during this time, and then let's get into the last chapter real quick. This is when he truly turns from God, and verse 1 through 9. I'm going to skip to okay. So I'll summarize it. The Lord tells him to punish the Amalekites and kill them all. King, all the animals, everything. Nothing's to survive. Totally destroy it, right? And then verse 8, he captures the king Agag alive and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. But Paul and the people spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the oxen, the fatlings, the lambs, and all was good, and were not willing to destroy them utterly. But everything despised and worthless they did destroy. And this is verse 10 and 11. This is the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I regret that I have made Saul king, for he has turned back from following me and has not carried out my commands. And Samuel was distressed and cried out to the Lord all night. So get a little bit further, and once again, Saul blames the people. They made me keep the good fat sheep alive. They made me keep the king alive. Right, the sacrifice. We have a good reason, Then Samuel comes and says, no. Samuel kills King Agag, and then he says, no. And he reports what the Lord told him, that you're no longer going to be king. It's better to obey than sacrifice. And I found this website doing this study, Olson Park Church of Christ, and I checked them out. It seemed like they might be a faithful congregation, but they had an article called God's Regret and the Issue of Foreknowledge that's based on this, where God regrets making him king. How's that possible? God doesn't, he's, right? And it basically, it's talking about that word regret and how for us it might mean, oh, we feel bad about it, but that doesn't mean that God didn't know what was going to happen. He was just, he knew that this was going to happen, but that doesn't change the fact that he feels bad about that it happened, right? Just because he knows it's going to happen doesn't mean he can't have the feelings. It's similar to I think all through Judges when he's talking about how he keeps telling him, if you just come back, if you repent and come back to me, this won't happen, right? And even when he talks to Samuel about them choosing to have a human king and kind of they're turning their back on me, not you, Samuel. That he has the feelings, even though he knew what was happening before. So it's a pretty good article. I left it up there. Maybe you could quick read it. It's very interesting about this topic. We know that. Was that? That I think it's mentioned in the article. Yes, yeah. I think about a lot of like Jonah. Jonah, he relented. He told me Ninevites are gonna die. That's it. I'm done. And then they repented and they sackcloths and all the morning, and he relented. Right? That's pretty much the same idea as this. Right? He could change his mind, or at least to us, he shows that he changed his mind. He didn't really change his mind. He knew all along what was going to happen. But to us, he wants to demonstrate that if we turn to him, he's there, ready for us, right? And if we turn from him, there's going to be consequences for that. And that's how we know. That's what he talks about here. It's you made the wrong choice, Saul. There's consequences. And remember, he's made previous mistakes. It's not like God said one and done. He gave him ample opportunity, because we know that God's patient and wants us all to turn to him, right? And he same with Saul. He wanted him to do that, but he didn't. Okay. Thank you. Sorry I went over.